I believe that we're all here for a short amount of time, and if you're just floating, what's the point? We should be here disrupting.
I'm Frances Morton from RE, and that was Kiani Matatasipu, one of the speakers who joined us and co-hosts the O9 for a special International Women's Day event in a crowded Auckland cafe one warm and rainy night. The theme, How I Found My Voice. Also speaking, MP Golriz Garmerman, fashion designer Christine Crabb, and School Strike for Climate founder and teenage counsellor Sophie Hanford. Here's Laura Taylor from the O9 to start things off.
I searched my own life to find when I found my voice and if I could attach it to a pivotal moment, and I couldn't. But the thing that I did find was that every time I had to use my voice, it was because it was a necessity. It was on behalf of someone who couldn't speak for themselves. It was when I didn't really want to, but I had to be really brave because they couldn't, or when I was really angry. And the O9 was born out of that kind of space. It was a place where I wanted to use my own voice and learn how to process, and also to create a place where other people could use their voices. And so, first of all, it's just amazing to see that audience reflected here tangibly. That's pretty incredible, so thank you. And anyone who doesn't read the blog, you can now. But also, I just want to tautoko you for coming out tonight as men and women who want to support wahine and to encourage and empower their voices. Now it's my absolute pleasure to invite up Golriz. But Golriz is, first of all, incredible. She's an Iranian-born MP. She was the first refugee to be elected to Parliament, and she's a former United Nations lawyer. But one of the things I think is just so incredible about her is she unapologetically will hold the powers that be to account. I don't know if many of you saw recently, but she also publicised her multiple sclerosis diagnosis, which is, again, just this incredible, representation of a community that we don't normally see. So it is my absolute pleasure to invite her up. Please take the floor away from me.
E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā karangatanga maha, tēnā koutou katoa. I wanted to begin by acknowledging the passing of Jeanette Fitzsimons, who is a woman who encouraged me in not just politics, but in taking my place in a movement that meant everything to her. And it's women like that who are leaders, who are willing to make space for others, and especially for those of us who belong to other systemically marginalised groups. And, I think the Green movement has sometimes been criticised for being a little bit monocultural and not noticing that its real roots and its real staunchness, comes from Indigenous communities and other communities around the world. And Jeanette was one of those people who acknowledged that and embodied that fight for equality so well. So it's been a very sad time for us, I think, as New Zealanders and as Greens. I also want to acknowledge that it's March, and so we're nearly a year from one of the most devastating tragedies in our nation's history. I think that, at least for me, and I truly believe for our whole nation, the wound is still pretty fresh. So I want to acknowledge that, and I want to acknowledge both the victims and the broader communities that were affected, because terrorism is actually aimed at a broader community. It's aimed at excluding them, making them fearful, and asserting the status quo. But I want us to remember that when that happened on the 15th of March last year, that all across the country we came out with love, and we wrapped our arms around each other, and we turned out in vigils, and we held our little ones a little bit tighter as we remembered that there was a little 3-year-old boy among the victims, Musad Ibrahim. And so I want to hold that love, those values of inclusion, and equality as we talk about equality today, and as we each talk about finding our voice, because I think we realised just how important it is for real inclusion, for substantive equality to happen in Aotearoa New Zealand. I became, as has already been mentioned, the first ever refugee to be a member of New Zealand's Parliament in 2017. It was something that was a little bit of a surprise to me, both the election and that particular historic, footnote, as it sometimes becomes. But I became the refugee MP, and I realised this as soon as I announced my candidacy. Someone figured it out. So that was the headlines. That was an identity point, and I received the reactions, the broad spectrum of reactions from all across the country and all across the world. Some of it was fear and hate and anger, and some of it, a lot of it, was love as well. And it happened to coincide with Donald Trump announcing his so-called Muslim ban, and Brexit had just happened the year before. So, in Britain they were talking about how terrible immigration is, and in America they were literally banning people who were born in the part of the world that I'm from. And here in Aotearoa we got to stand as a counterpoint to that, and I got to receive that love on behalf of, everyone who kind of made this an inclusive society. I realised really quickly how much representation matters. And that goes across my work, across sort of my life now. I realise that my story matters, so I'll tell you a little bit of my story. I think it's something that's that sometimes is harrowing to hear, but it's really common for refugees to have experienced similar things. I was born right after what is called one of the biggest popular revolutions in modern history, the Iranian Revolution, where everyone turned out onto the streets. There was, students, socialists, communists, and Islamists as well. But they were fighting to take back their oil resource because they wanted to fight inequality, and they wanted democracy. They saw their regime that was ruling them as undemocratic, and it was. They wanted political freedom. But their revolution, even though they won, and this included my parents, was hijacked. So my life was ultimately shaped by one of the most repressive regimes in modern history. And I always remember that when the Islamic Republic, and it purports to be Muslim, but it's just, any old dictatorship, really, wanted to enforce Islamic dress on women, 1 million women turned out to march. And they were mostly Muslim. They just didn't believe their bodies should be controlled by the government. And they did that at the risk of death and torture. They faced tanks, as they had done for democracy. They faced death for feminism. So I hold on to that because our values exist in every culture, whether it's human rights, whether it's feminism, whether it's environmentalism. My dad worked as an engineer developing plant-sourced energies, so I'm green to the core. And I think we sometimes forget that, but it's really, really important, especially as feminists, to remember that it sometimes looks a bit different. Women in Iran have fought now for 30-odd years, and their front line is different than ours. They want to be colourful, to show the female form, to be sexualised and visible, because their patriarchy is different. It tells them to be colourless and shapeless and invisible, but they are just as staunch, if not, the most sort of inspirational feminists I've ever known. And I want to remember as well, as we think about a thing like the terror attack in Christchurch, that the reason that representation matters is that we are all experiencing the world differently. It's not enough for us to be consulted, because those consultations, they sometimes go nowhere. But also, how does a straight cisgendered Pākehā man know what to consult on for the interests and the needs of a disabled queer woman of colour. We're experiencing everything through the prisms of our lived experience, whether it's healthcare or housing or roads or justice. And I remember thinking about Christchurch, that it was the Islamic Women's League who came up and screaming their grief after that day to say that they'd been reporting these hate crimes for 5 years. They'd done a tour of the country to the police force, and they'd gone unnoticed. Their cries had gone unnoticed, and in fact, white supremacy was not seen as a risk, just as the Muslim victim communities had been, just as Māori had been, and had been targeted. And it was Tangata Whenua who stood up and made that space for that community, who said, when there was that moment where it looked like we might all just absolve the status quo ourselves, whoever, and just kind of say, well, this is not us, and he was born in Australia or whatever else. And it was Māori who said, actually, this is a little bit us. We've been experiencing this for 150 years, so let's look at it. It's time to learn our history and be brave. I think that the way that I found my voice and the confidence to speak, and I think I really relate to what you've said in that it is about making sure that there is a voice sometimes, and there's people who don't necessarily have a platform and a voice, and sometimes it takes some of us to run before others can walk, and I think that's an old feminist adage. And, you know, we do hear that sometimes we're going too far and too fast, but actually until we are all actually equal, we need to go faster and we need to go further. But I think that the one thing I do want to notice as well is that it can't be that the onus is on individual women, particularly not individual women from otherwise marginalised communities, to break that glass ceiling. It's not that safe. And I learnt that a little bit with some of the things that I get, you know, and I stood up for my maiden speech in Parliament, and I talked about the death threats then. It was 18 months before the terror attack, and it was threats of gun violence because people had assumed that I was Muslim. So it's not that that we can just keep pushing individual women to put themselves in that position. We have to reform our institutions. That police force has to take account of the safety of the Muslim community, of women, because we know we're also the other community who reports and doesn't get taken notice of equally. So those institutions have to change, and institutions of power have to make space. That means that the people with power have to make space. But that only makes our decision-making stronger. You know, roads and houses and a justice system that are built with the input of everyone's experiences are only ever going to be more effective. So that's what I hope to do with my voice, not just to be another face in another story, which I know helps. So you can't be what you can't see. I think that is true. It will help more of us to stand up. But what we do with that power is that we have to reform. The barriers have to be broken down. I think that the inspiration for me right now is that love that poured out after March 15th, because I think those people, the people at those vigils, will hold us to account now as politicians, as media personalities, as anyone with a platform, and judge us as to how we use our platforms. I think that what New Zealand has said now is that we do want to be brave and shine a light on those little corners of prejudice, of hate, of inequality that we do happen to have, and we want to actually face and solve those problems. I think we owe it to all of us who turned out to be brave and to weave that love into an enduring fabric of our society. Thank you.
I'm just going to welcome Kiani Matatasipu up to what we're calling the fountain here. Now, when we invited Kiani to be part of this and asked her for a bio, she said, which version do you want? Because I do so much. Essentially she does so much. It's hard to whittle that down. So I might just give an abridged intro here and let her fill in the gaps if I miss anything. Kiani is an artist, a journalist, a communications consultant, and a social activist. She was born and raised in Ihumātao in South Auckland, and that's probably a place that a few years ago we might not have known about, but suddenly in the last year or so we've got to be quite familiar with. And that's a large part due to Kiani. She's a founding member of SOUL, Save Our Unique Landscape. Her and her cousins have got together and led an incredible movement for change in that area, which is still ongoing. She's also incredibly suited for tonight because she's put together a project which is called Nuku Woman, where she's documenting stories of an Indigenous woman through podcast, photos. She takes beautiful photos, she makes videos, and shares these incredible stories. So we're she's gonna start off with a little kōrero for a while, and then I'll kick in with some questions from there. Welcome, Kiani.
That's my auntie in the back. Tēnā koutou everyone. So my name looks difficult, but it's actually quite easy. So it's just Kiane. Don't get confused with the Q. My mother's very much ahead of her time. He uri ahau no Ihumātao, so I'm from Ihumātao, and I was born and raised in Mangere, South Auckland, and schooled there. When we were discussing the topic of how you found your voice, I was like, I don't know when it was, because I've always been loud, I've always been big, I've always been quite out there, I'm very foul-mouthed, and I've always been quite bossy and quite pushy. So I think I came out with my voice and just learned how to use it along the way. But I like to go back to a story of when I was 2 years old, and my nan did an interview with me on a little tape recorder, and I like to say that was my first podcast. She interviewed me about our day, and at 2 years old I was having a full-on conversation, so obviously my voice was there. And then we sang some waiata, and all throughout my life, those women, my grandmother, my mother, my aunties, have all been hugely influential. They have all taught me to be strong, independent, kick-ass Indigenous wahine, and to never apologise for it. And my mother's motto was, don't ask for permission, just ask for forgiveness later, which coming from your mother is, quite interesting advice. And so I went all through school very determined with what I wanted to do. And when I got to my final year of high school, we didn't have the internet back then. It was just starting, not that old, but it was just starting. And there was this big blue careers book, and some people in this room may remember it, but it had all the kinds of careers that you could choose, and it had the name of it, what qualifications you needed to have, what you needed to have studied at school, and the salary band. And everyone always just went straight to the salary band and wanted to do that. And we had a stand-in careers teacher who wasn't from South Auckland, who wasn't a Māori or Pacifica woman, who came into our school that was 99% Māori Pacifica kids from South Auckland. And I said to her, I want to be a journalist. And she said, oh, you might want to look for something else. This is going to be a podcast day because I really want to swear. Because I basically said, fuck you. And just was like, how dare you tell me I need to look for something else? But straight away I realised that I sort of had my first experience of racism and classism, and I want to say sexism because I was a woman, and even though she was a woman, she didn't think a young woman from that community could do that job. And so I went out to prove myself right because I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of proving her wrong, and went through and got a full scholarship at university and studied journalism. So that was awesome. But there I really got to use my voice, and that was the beginning of me finding my there's a Samoan word for it, and it's mau, which is, I like your purpose. And everybody goes through life and they go, what's my purpose and what am I doing? And I gradually have learnt that my purpose in life, or my mau, is to tell the stories of marginalised communities so we can change the narrative for future generations. And so whether it's through working with my cousins to fight for our whenua in Ihumātao and to get justice for that, or whether it's through my media and communications business that I run, whether it's through my artwork that I exhibit around the world, or whether it's through me being a mother to a very headstrong 2-year-old, that is what I always have in my mind. What is it that I'm doing, and how am I doing it, and what am I saying yes to, and how is it changing the narrative for future generations? And so while I do a lot of different things, they all come under that umbrella. And for me, that is me using my voice, and that's helping other people to find their voice. I believe that we're all here for a short amount of time, and if you're just floating, what's the point? We should be here disrupting. Every single person in this room should be disrupting. You should be disrupting systems, you should be disrupting communities, you should be disrupting hierarchies, you should be going home and disrupting your household, because that is how we create change. And if you're not disrupting, then you're just floating. And floating doesn't change anything. And so when I created Nuku a few years ago, I launched it 27th of January last year, but was thinking about it a little bit before that. It was all about creating and growing this army of disruptors, this army of Indigenous female disruptors, so that my daughter in 20 years' time can, as Gora said, can see and be. So she can see all of these different things and be any one of them. She will not have to fight for some of the things that I've had to fight for, that my tupuna have had to fight for. And I really feel sorry for any of you and your children, because she is a disruptor that's going to set the world on fire. So I think that that's something that I've also held very close in terms of using my voice, and that's what I'm hoping Nuku to become. So Nuku is about profiling 100 kick-ass Indigenous wahine doing things differently. We've just this week releasing number 26. I'm up to number 30 behind the scenes, and really looking forward to figuring out the next 70 with no money over the next year. You might want to ask me some questions.
I feel like if someone can do it, you can. So, those 70, look out for them coming soon. I'm really interested in that idea of the narratives that exist around us, and how oftentimes they're so present that we find it quite hard to see them. How did you, in order to disrupt a narrative, you first have to kind of be very aware of it. Can you tell me, you mentioned the situation at school with the counsellor, is there other times, can you give us an example where a narrative has been imposed on you from the outside that just never didn't sit right with you?
Probably my whole life. If I use Ihumātao as an example, I grew up in a community and continue to grow up in a community that is the longest continual settlement of Māori in Auckland. It is the birthplace of Tāmaki Makaurau. It has huge cultural, historical, archaeological significance, but by the city of Auckland, it's treated like a bit of crap on the side. That a wastewater treatment plant has come in the 60s and ruined both the river and the moana. The maunga were quarried to build Auckland's roads and Auckland's runways, airport runways. Factories have encroached on the community, and we were always that community that was just those guys on the side. And it never, ever, ever sat well with me, because it's my home and it's my whānau and we're the best things in the world, as I'm sure those things are to each of you as well. But the significance of that area as passed down to me by my grandparents was always at the forefront of my mind. And so having a voice for ihumātao came naturally for myself and my cousins and all of our whānau that live there, because it is such of such significance. And I think if you sometimes we tend to listen to the louder voices or the more powerful voices because they're the ones that dominate the space. If you take the time to stop and breathe and then show up, you get to learn what some of those narratives truly are, and you can help to disrupt them. If you tune out of mainstream media and stop taking photos of food on your phone and actually go somewhere and meet the people there and talk to them and grow some kai, you learn so much more about these different narratives and can figure out ways in which you might be able to either contribute to their disruption or take some of that whakaaro, some of that thinking back to whatever you're working on or what you're passionate about or wherever you're from.
One of the things that struck me about that coverage over that time, particularly on the height of the eviction and the thousands of people drawing to ihumātao to be part of that, was you saw some subtle changes in the narrative around that time, maybe not so subtle. One of them was the use of the word protectors over protesters. Did you have anything to do with that?
Just a little bit. So there are 6 of us who started the kaupapa at ihumātao. We will never take credit as the only people, because our parents and our grandparents have done much work before us. And as you said, 10,000 people showed up just in that first week. And it was really important for us to change some of the narratives that were coming out in mainstream media that, oh, here we go again, more protesters. If you look at some of the biggest movements and changes in the world, it is protesters who have created that change. And so it was really important to us to distinguish the difference between what people assume a protester is and what we believe it to be. And what we are doing and have been doing is protecting whenua, protecting history, and protecting the future for your tamariki e mokopuna. And so yes, a lot of the narrative changing was, while it may have seemed like a natural shift, a lot of that was planned. In the first week, it was planned in a very cold, not even gazebo, like a bit of tarp with lots of rain coming in and people huddled under having these secret meetings. And then it was planned in a portacom, and now it's being planned in the middle of a field. It doesn't matter where you are, what resources you can have a voice. And putting your heads together with others makes that voice so much stronger.
Awesome. Something we just had touched on very briefly when we chatted in advance of tonight, and it struck me because you volunteered and said it was something you're willing to share, but something about your own family and your struggles with fertility. You know, that again is related to the stories that we live by, and I think no matter, I guess it's something that we've heard a little bit about motherhood and juggling our lives with motherhood and where that plan fits. And I think for women, well, from a young age, really, that's always factors into our stories and our lives. Can you give any sort of insights, I suppose, into firstly, you know, how you came to motherhood and where that sits within the stories and your expectations, and what happens when it doesn't go according to plan?
So because I have a big mouth, I don't mind talking about anything.
She told me nothing was off limits.
Nothing's off limits. And my husband and I were together 14 years before we had my baby. I suffered through a very quiet depression that not even my mother or my sister knew about. My husband knew about it because he would see me in a big black hole on the floor of my bedroom quite often. We met as teenagers, and he is one of 11 boys, and so we were just like, yep, kids are going to be easy, we're going to have a tribe. He wanted a rugby team, and whānau was hugely important to the both of us. And so we thought having kids was going to be easy. forgot to take into account that my grandmother struggled to have children, and my mother had two of us 10 years apart. And so when we were actively trying, instead of just having fun, we obviously weren't falling pregnant very quickly and had gone to see doctors, and the doctors were like, you haven't been trying for long enough. We're like, we've been together since we were 17, surely it's been long enough. And they, would send us for tests, and I'm not the skinniest person, and so they were like, you know what, it's your BMI's too high. So that's what it is. And there was all these excuses, and I'm like, I know heaps of fat people that have babies. What are you talking about? And turns out I had polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is quite common amongst women, and lots of women who have it can still have children. But it was something that was quite devastating to me because I really, really yearned to have a child or to have children. When we went through various stages of treatments, and it was quite interesting because, when you're 17, everyone's like, practice safe sex, don't get pregnant, and so you try really, really hard not to get pregnant, and then when you want to, and it doesn't go to plan, you sort of wonder whether or not you should have just tried when you were 17. And so what I found was there was a lot of stigma around being a Māori Pasifika woman who didn't have a family or who didn't have children, because it's implied that we're supposed to have big families. And infertility isn't something that's talked about amongst women often. And so I struggled to find people who were in a similar situation to me because no one would openly share about it. In the end, my husband and I underwent various treatments, and they all failed. And we were getting ready to do IVF. We were saving money because we had to pay for it because, again, my BMI was too high because I'm just too awesome. And we're saving money and decided that we'd put our bodies through this rigorous health regime to make sure that IVF and that $20,000 spend was going to be worth it. We also went through this spiritual journey. Now, my husband is a Christian and I'm not. And so we tried to blend these different values together and saw an Indigenous haputanga specialist and all of these different things that we had tried. And then we went and hiked Mount Tongariro, not to get pregnant, just because my friends wanted to do it. But this journey of this hike and leading up to it and eating healthily, and I suppose what's now called keto, but not having dairy and sugar, which I later found out is actually really good if you have PCOS, that sugar, carbs, and dairy actually do not do you any favours. So if you can, and you're wanting to have children and you have this condition, try not to eat those things, because actually it helps your hormones so much better when you don't have those foods in your system. And so in the end, we naturally fell pregnant by some miracle. Our baby's name is Hayatati Kapua Melepusiaki Eleanor Ikatonga Sipu. She is named after 4 amazing wahine tupuna of hers, because if we were only going to have one child, she was going to carry all of those names. And her first name is Hayatati Kapua. And so what I also ended up doing was writing a feature for Mana magazine about infertility amongst Māori women, and shared my story and shared the story of 4 other women, a lesbian couple who didn't have all the ingredients to have a baby, a couple who successfully went through IVF, another couple who had unsuccessful attempts at IVF but decided that they were going to donate sperm and in turn had the babies for the lesbian, or gave the sperm that made the babies for the lesbian couple. And then another couple who had unsuccessful IVF, who I touched base with about 1.5 years after the feature, just, quite emotional things to talk about, and I really wanted to check in. And they fell pregnant. And so I guess for me, I say no topic is off limits because if we're able to share these sorts of things and speak about them openly and go, you know what, sometimes life doesn't go to plan. But these are some of the things you can try and some of the things you can do and take away some of that stigma. Hopefully that helps. And again, that's about finding your voice. What I do know, and some of the tips, if there are people in this room who really want to have children and it hasn't happened yet, one, don't give up hope, but sometimes you want to and it does suck and I know that it's horrible. Two, if people around you keep saying when you're going to have kids, tell them to fuck off. Like, honestly, it's not rude. Just say it. But three, go and seek treatment early because treatment is not a bad thing. Going to see a doctor or going to talk to a specialist about what your options are is not a bad thing. And one of the key things I learned is when you turn 35, your fertility halves. And so if I'm going to be 35 this year and I want to have another baby, and so I need to sort myself out and probably drop some of these commitments, but if you are nearing that age, go and have a chat to someone and just hold on to that hope. When my grandmother passed away, I still hadn't yet had a baby, and it was probably the worst time of my life. And so with my daughter came Nuku. And when I was growing her, the Nuku project was growing, and I'm now at this point. And I guess if we're talking about juggling motherhood and, you know, the 25,000 things that we do as women, sometimes I feel like a big failure as a mother. And I think, God, I tried so hard to have this baby and I'm never bloody home, and I'm at all these meetings and I'm speaking at these events at nighttime when it's her bedtime. But at the end of the day, I always have to think about the world I'm trying to make for her. And so while I have this big picture in mind, my husband always reminds me that I also have to remember the day-to-day things of what she's going to experience now. And then, of course, the amazing world that we're all going to make for her in the future.
Welcome, Sophie. Grab the microphone. I'm just introduced to you all Sophie Hanford. Sophie is from Paekakariki and has come up to Tamaki Makaurau for tonight. She, as of last year, was elected New Zealand's youngest councillor on the Kapiti District Council, Kapiti Coast District Council. She's a founder of the School Strike for Climate. And in the RE archives, she's definitely got a voice. She's one of our panellists tonight who's appeared in more than one video already. So, welcome, Sophie. And I'm just gonna hand it over to her, and she's gonna have a little kōrero straight for 10 minutes. Thanks.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko wainui tuku maunga, ko wainui tuku awa no Paekakariki aho, ko Peter Hanford toku papa, ko Bridget Pibford toku mama, ko Sophie Hanford toku ingoa. My name's Sophie, I'm 19 and I live in Paekakariki, which is a small seaside village just north of Wellington. And I'm just here to share a little bit about how I found my voice and how that led me into School Strike for Climate, and then even further into now my role as an elected representative, which I never thought I would do, especially at this age. But I'll talk to you a little bit about my journey to that point. So I've always been someone that can't sit by and watch things happen. So from when I went to primary school, I saw that our school didn't have a disco, so I organised a disco. Then I got to high school and we didn't have a girls' cricket team, so I pulled together a girls' cricket team. I wanted to do technology, but I saw that there were no wahine, no women in our technology class at school, so I joined technology. I felt like at that point I hadn't really found my voice, but I had found my passion for action. But I was never someone who would speak up about those things. I would just be someone that would work in the background and go ahead and set up the little girls' cricket team, but no one would really know about it. Or I'd sneakily sign up to those technology classes. But I think, the next kind of few years after graduating, I found my voice a bit more. But I think the reason why at college it was easy for me to do that was because I joined a group called Girl Up. And I'm not sure if you've heard of that, but it's a United Nations Foundation campaign to support girls in developing countries. So we developed a really strong group of a network of wahine within our school that really backed me to get involved in some of those things at high school. So I also, I guess, moving on from college and then starting School Strike for Climate last year and founding that in Aotearoa, I guess I kind of found my voice for that out of a sense of fear and just out of a sense of knowing that our planet can't speak for itself. And I think if our planet could speak for itself right now, it would be crying out for help. And it would be yelling and it would be demanding action from our politicians. And it was almost like there was a group of us that could all feel that. And we found each other and we got started. And I'll tell you how that got started because I don't even know how we are where we are now because we just started literally by creating some social media pages and we made a website and then we asked people to sign up. And when people signed up to our website and they were from a new region that I wasn't in touch with, I just got on the phone and said, I've seen that you've signed up to School Strike for Climate and you're from Christchurch. Are you keen to organise in Christchurch? Are you keen to organise in Auckland? So we just rang around and now we've developed a nationwide team and managed to mobilise 170,000 people just from that. So a message is just, if you want to do a project, get some social media up and hold yourself to account because once we made that social media and once like a few hundred people were following us, there was no turning back. So we knew that we were in it. But I think, the reason why was out of a sense of fear, but also out of a sense of knowing that my voice is powerful, that our voices are powerful, and that we can do something about this, and not wanting to stand by and let someone take that right that we have away from me or away from us. So that's something that I think is a testament and is shown in all of these social and political and Indigenous rights and women's rights, environmental movements in New Zealand. It's just ordinary people who are seeing something that's happening around them that doesn't settle with them, and they're going to use their voice to do something about it. So I'm privileged to be a part of something with so many amazing young people. And I want to tell you a story about one of the young women in our group. So Lucy, she's 12 years old and she is down in Christchurch at Beckenham School. She's just started at Kashmir High. And we call almost every night. I'm kind of mentoring her a little bit. And she said to me one night on the phone, Sophie, guess what I've done? And I was like, oh gosh, what have you done? And she said, I've invited the Prime Minister to my school. And I was like, wow, okay, cool. All right, let me know how it goes. And then about a week later, I got a message from her again, and the Prime Minister accepted her invitation. And this was from a 12-year-old who just used her voice to simply send an email to the Prime Minister and managed to get the Prime Minister to come to her school. And so I think just that in itself inspires me. So I'm privileged to be inspired also by younger women than myself, who are so incredibly brave. I think I also realised that if not me, then who? If I sit by and watch while we destroy our planet and while we continue to let people profit off of the exploitation of our planet, then who's going to do something about it? And what if no one does? Then what future does that leave for all of us young wahine in the room? And I just couldn't stand by and let that happen as well. But there were definitely times, and also when I was running for election, that people tried to take that voice away from me. People who were interviewing me, people who were commenting on things on social media, people who were private messaging me, pretty nasty things. But what I say and my approach to that, we don't give it our energy. I don't give it my energy because we have a limited amount of energy to spend in a day, to use in a day, and how we use that is so precious, especially at this point in time when there are so many issues to fix. And if there are people that want to bring us down, I say we don't give them energy. And that really helped me, especially, and also in my political, somehow, getting into local government. So only 2 months ago, about 5 months ago, actually, I was elected. But only 2 months before that, I was planning on going to Germany. I had a job locked in to be an au pair. I was going to be paid to fly over and look after these kids. And once I got involved with School Strike for Climate, I realised that actually that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. What I'm supposed to be doing is staying here. We've only got 10 years. We know that we need to use these next 10 years in the best way that we possibly can. So cancelled that trip, gave it to a friend and said, you know what, I'm just going to run. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but let's do it. And up until the last day, I was running unopposed, which essentially meant that if no one put their hat in the ring, if no one else put their hat in the ring, I would have just been elected without even having to campaign. So right up until that last day, I thought that, oh, sweet, awesome, I'm going to have another chance to use my voice that I've found through School Strike for Climate. But on the last day, 2 middle-aged white men, one of them who owns 4 businesses in my area, decided to run. So I was like, oh, yeah, okay. I'd planned, kind of not to campaign, and I was just planning on kind of things that I wanted to change within council. So then I had to pull together a campaign team. My whole campaign team younger than myself. So my campaign manager was 17, the guy who designed my website, 15. So absolutely amazing group of people that I got to work alongside. I went to a few debates, we did a clothes swap, we did a gig, we did a quiz night, all in the space of 2 months. I don't know how we pulled it off. And then I managed to be elected with more votes than both of them combined. Don't know how I did it. But I think there are people out there who want something new. And I think there are people out there who want to hear from young people, and especially older people. That's the feedback I got when knocking on doors, was older people saying, you know what, we're ready to hand the mic. If young people have their voice ready to go, here's the mic, take it. And that's what I got a lot. So another message that I have is if you're worried about, not using your voice because you're worried that people won't listen or respect your voice, I think people are just waiting, and people are ready. So when you're ready and when you're willing to take that step, go for it. But something that I found was just having self-belief was so important. Taking care of myself, taking care of my own wairua, and taking care of my own way that I was treating myself when things got tough, because I could have let what people had to say define me. And I think it's even more important that we're instilling that in our young wahine. So I also do some work at a girls' science and technology group after schools, and the most important thing for me in that is ensuring that these young girls are believing in themselves and believing in their voice. Because if you're using your voice, but you're not giving yourself grace, and you're not loving your voice and supporting your voice with all that you have and with the passion that you have, then it's easy for people to tear you down. And as I said before, this is such a critical moment in history where we can't afford to let people tear us down. So I'm standing with all of you, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you all find your voices and hearing about how you found your voices. That's me, and I look forward to hopefully if you have any questions in the panel.
And now it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Christine Crabb, if you want to come have a seat. Christine is from the Inimitable Miss Crab. Some of you may know. She started it back in 2004. Is that right? And Christine was actually the first person that me and Kim interviewed for the 09. Kim picked me up from Māori Television, where I was working at the time, and I was absolutely shitting myself. And turned up to interview her, and she was just as dreamy in person as she is in her designs, and also was willing to give a voice to 2 basically fangirls, which I think is just such an amazing depiction of who she is and the kind of person that she is. And she navigates the creative space in New Zealand like no other person does. And so we're just going to do a little Q&A up here. I took your microphone. So, you started Miss Crab back in 2004.
Yes.
I'm going to sit on this side. Can you tell us a bit about that? Like, was it like turning an art project into a business? How did you view it? What was the dream?
Well, I'd had 3 years running a store on Karangahape Road called Ripshit and Bust. And that's what I started up with a girlfriend after we finished fashion school. And we sold our friends' work, and we were just kind of navigating our space in the industry at the time and just working out where we fitted in, and just learning so much about how it all works, all the media side of things, and then sort of we really all wanted this freedom to make our own things, because back then I felt like the fashion industry was very much sort of this one idea. And that's changed so much in the last 15 years. It's much more fluid and broad and like much more eclectic, which is wonderful. And then actually I was feeling a little bit kind of tired of it, of doing Rip, Shit and Bust. And then my friend Natalia Cuccia had an amazing store on Ponsonby Road, and she offered, and I was actually selling my clothes through her store, and she offered if I wanted to take on the lease. And the 41 Ponsonby Road has always just been like a dream space for me. So I kind of thought, okay, well, I'll just do it, and I'll just do a new project that was kind of like a real refinement of my own aesthetic and what I wanted to kind of say and do in the industry, and just kind of, just push forward and just give it a good crack. So, and I thought it was like kind of, because like Miss Crab was kind of my high school nickname, but I thought it was quite a bizarre kind of name for a fashion label, and I was like, oh, this might not really work, but it's my surname, and I was like, oh, so it's sort of like that's kind of a symbol of I wanted it to be more my aesthetic. So that's how it started, and I still felt like I didn't know that much, so I just sort of had to work quite hard to kind of do everything and say everything I wanted to say, and make a mark,
And I can imagine it's one thing to have that kind of idea or that kind of concept, but the actual grit and determination it takes to turn it into a tangible reality. Like, what kind of mindset do you need to have to do that?
It's pretty crazy. Like, you have to be quite tenacious, but also I feel like it's quite a grounding thing too, when you really believe in what you're doing and you kind of have this faith, and so that kind of propels you. So to just go forward and get through all the challenges and all the really steep learning curves and things, and then you are rewarded because you get to put your work and your voice out into the world, and then you get you get feedback from your customers and your fans and your friends and family. So, and that's kind of, that's the cool thing about it. Mm.
I know we talked a bit about this today, but I think I've been lucky enough to surround myself with creative people. Most of my best friends are Enneagram 4s. Is there any Enneagram 4s in the house? Kim, put your hand up. But I think when you're a creative person, you view the world in slightly a different way. Like, I found maybe if it's even just a sensitivity to the beauty in the world and the pain in the world, and navigating that space can be quite difficult. And I know we talked about in New Zealand, that's even harder. How did you manage to find your voice in that space as a creative person?
Well, it's kind of funny when you're not really brought up in a creative space and you don't really know much about art history and all the things that go into making contemporary culture and things like that. It's just not part of your psyche. And so learning all that stuff and then realising how your own work and your own creativity taps into that stuff is just like a work in progress. Do
you feel like you suffered pushback at any point, that people couldn't see things the way that you could see them?
I think so, definitely. When I first started making kind of these very kind of drapey, fluid kind of things that had no particular size and just accessible for anybody really. People didn't understand, and they thought that it was quite the opposite of what I was going for, because I wanted to just make everybody feel really beautiful and really sexy and just have fun and party. But then lots of people interpreted it as the opposite, that it was baggy and daggy and and also no finesse. But that's the other thing, is I would just spend way too long making all the clothes. So but anyway, it didn't matter. I just kept on going and kept making and kept pushing forward and just gaining more and more momentum and more fans and just having this positivity is this thing that led me through to keep this journey going.
And so you actually last year made the decision to end Miss Crab.
Yeah, I did. It was actually in 2018, and it was kind of it was probably a 2-year sort of funny journey where I was I actually was suffering from a bit of depression, and so I knew that I had to get back on this really good path for the sake of my life and my children. And so I just wanted to fall back in love with my work again. And so, so I did that, and then had a really great year creatively, and loved everything that I did, and did new stuff. And then, but it's always hard, like running a business, and everything is like always quite hard and challenging. And and I just woke up one day and I was like, I just don't want to do this anymore. And so after that sort of period of going up and down, like I just knew that, and it was just such an easy thing to kind of to do for me. So it was good.
Did you find at any point, like, you make it sound really easy, I know, but was it a convoluted decision? Like, did you find that you had to extract the art from your identity in a way, that it was part of you?
I think, definitely, like, because I think for me personally, being a creative person makes me feel human and alive. And so I was a little bit like, oh, what's going to happen? But then I also felt quite grounded that I'm always going to be this creative person, and I don't need to have a brand or an identity or like anything like that to still be me. Like, my kids were quite worried when I had told them, and they're like, what are you going to do? I was like, I don't know, but I'll always be a creative person. But I think just, like, I had processed so much of that stuff over the sort of 2 years before I had just decided, to do something different. And I just knew that I needed a break as well. And just as a creative person, do something different. Like, I had no idea what I was going to do. I was like, I could just get a job and work in in the healthcare sector or like in the environment, like do something that's kind of, I don't know, like seems more meaningful on the surface, maybe.
I know we talked again a bit about this today, but I think on the topic of finding your voice, it's such an incredible thing that you've done to not work under another brand or for another organisation, but to actually go out on your own. I mean, there might be people here who want to start something of their own but feel like they don't have something to say or they don't have something to offer. What would you say? Big question, sorry.
Yeah. Well, it's really beautiful to have like the opportunity to be able to say something and have a platform, and to sort of have this idea that you want to say something. Like, that is pretty cool to realise that. Sorry, say the question again.
What would you say to someone who's struggling to find their voice?
Oh, right. I think it just comes down to self-belief and, just working really hard. There's nothing, it's like, it is very simple. Like, your idea should be very common sense and very close to your heart. So, Yeah.
And you've spoken a bit about your kids, and I've had the privilege of coming into your beautiful home. How, I know it's a classic question, but how do you navigate motherhood and what you do, especially when as a creative it takes up so much of your space? Like, you get so into that idea. How do you navigate that?
It's really challenging.
Really?
You just need to make use of all your beautiful friends and family who can support you. I felt like I always had wonderful support in that way. But it's just, you just make those massive sacrifices for a few years, and then I kind of love that being a woman, just navigating the buzzy world that we live in with all this political change and stuff that's going on for women, and all the challenges that we have to go through every day. Like, we get to grow and become strong and like become these amazing diamonds, when we're older. Which is cool. Like, everything's a challenge, but it's like amazing as well that we get to experience this.
And I'm lucky enough tonight to wear something that you've made, which is maybe from a little new project, possibly?
So I have been kind of planning a new little creative project over the last few months. I'm just going to do lots of things that I never got to do with when I had Miss Crab, and just kind of follow the creative journey of my life and like who I am. So,
Is there anything else you want to share?
It's a little bit of a wait and see kind of thing. Yeah.
Oh, I meant about tonight.
Oh.
I was just going to wrap it up.
Anything you'd like to ask? The ethics of fashion. Yeah. Oh yes, no. Goris was just asking about the ethics of fashion, which like it's just, to me, like it's just such common sense. Like it's just the way that I run my life and my business, and it's kind of, you can see it in the way the work looks. Like it's for everybody. Like. But also just the way that we run our business as well. Like it's a supportive environment and it's like very fair, but it's also hardworking and you get these great results at the end. And yeah, I don't know. I just do my thing. Like I don't really, I just do what I think's best. Yeah.
And it's very, very good. Can we have a round of applause, please? Thank you. Thank you so much. Is there any questions from tonight that people would like to ask?
For each of you, when you achieved sort of the successes you have, whether it's in business owning, in political activism or political representation as well, what was one of the things that surprised you the most from what you expected it would be like to what it actually was in reality?
I think maybe like the strength and the longevity of the sort of success. Like you nail something and then it goes really well, but then it just keeps growing and then it becomes like this kind of scratch that just gets deeper and deeper, and you're like, oh, like I really was on this right path, even though you're doing something that is quite fresh, you know, or that hasn't been done before. So yeah, so that's like a real achievement when you're having a bad day, or you know, you look back on the things that you've done and the impact you've created, and it's like quite cool.
Another one?
The thing that surprised you? Okay, so both the Protect Te Humatao Soul campaign and Nuku were founded at my house, either at my kitchen table or on my living room floor, and were just from the heart things that we knew had to be done, with no money and no support and no backing, and for the Protect Te Humatao campaign, no experience, and they've become what they are today. And I think we were very naive and didn't know what we were doing back then, and sometimes we still don't. But if you're doing something right, if you're doing something that's tika and that sits well in your puku, then it will succeed. And so the surprise is that I didn't trust the puku back then, and I've learnt to do that 5 years later.
Yeah, I'd like to tautoko both of what fellow panellists have said, and also that it surprised me how many more people just want to keep joining the movement, and that even after we've achieved one thing or there's been one success, how many people want to keep joining. For example, my campaign team, as soon as I was elected, that grew then to the office of Sophie Handford that they created themselves. And now one of them manages my email, and I've got a couple more people who want to help out, just helping me manage my life. And these are just young people who are like keen to just have some experience, read some policy, help me digest that kind of stuff as well. So I think I was really surprised that even when I achieved something that I thought was success, that actually there are people who just want to keep being involved in those things, and that you should never underestimate the power of more people joining and a movement that just continues to grow. And School Strike for Climate, very similar. Like we started with no money, we still have no money, and we're just making things happen, and we're just trying to get people out on the streets, because we think that's an awesome lever that we can pull to achieve change. So I think that something that surprised me was just the impact of people power, and how little resource you need to actually create that success, because I was really surprised at what we were able to achieve. And that was not just like School Strike for Climate New Zealand organisers, that was because every single one of those 170,000 people came out on the street. And that's what made the number, and that's what made the impact. So, yeah.
Cool, maybe one more. There's a brave soul out there. Yeah? Do you want to yell it?
So I guess as women, a lot of us experience that inner voice that's like the doubt and the shame. How have you guys, and everything amazing that you've done, conquered the doubt and the shame of that inner voice?
I'll just
No, that's okay.
shall I? I'll just repeat the question maybe.
Well, I think.
I'll just repeat the question for everybody who may have missed it or on the recording. How do you conquer the doubt and shame, that inner voice that questions you?
No, that's okay. I'll do my best. I think by affirming yourself, by telling yourself that you're doing the right thing, because as you said, like, it's a feeling in the puku, it's a feeling in the heart. As simple as looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, you know what, you're really cool. You got out of bed this morning, you took a shower, you're succeeding at life, you made yourself some food, like just those little things, like acknowledging yourself for the little things. And then when you achieve something even greater than that, it's like, whoa, and you're amazed at yourself. So I would say that for me is something that I was pretty terrible at finding time to do, but I've realized the importance of it. And I think obviously, like, when you're doing that for yourself, then you're able to pour more of yourself into the cause that you're fighting for too. So obviously when you're feeling kind of battered by that inner voice or that inner shame, to actually be able to, and supported by my friends too, like my friends hold me to account with that, because there were times when I was not taking care of that and I wasn't acknowledging that inner voice of doubting myself. But I was just kind of continuing to push myself into places where it probably wasn't safe for me to just keep going, and but just to take that time to reflect on that and to affirm myself and to know that I'm doing the right thing at the right time for the right cause. I hope that makes sense.
Well, you've heard the language I use, so that's probably what I would say to my inner voice. But to give a fresh answer or a fresh perspective is sometimes we let that inner voice get too loud, and it might just be a little thing like you screwed up on that, and you're just a failure at this whole thing and actually really crap at this, and nobody's watching your stories, and now you're ugly and your kid hates you, and it spirals, and that you're this one little thing of you're going to fail or you're really crap can become something much bigger, and if you're very stressed at the same time, it can catapult into some really ugly negative talk, and so while you're reaffirming and all of that sort of stuff, one of the things that I often do, and sometimes I'm forced to do, one, have a really good or even just one or two group of women around you who know you and who actually really know you, who are, when you go, I'm okay, they're going to go, no, you're not. Shut up, stop lying. Have those women around you, and have them around you to know you well enough to know when they have to maybe help pull you out of that if it has gone a little bit too far. Some of the things that I do myself is I reconnect to atua Māori, which for everybody else is the environment. Take off your shoes and go and stand on the earth and actually reconnect to the whenua and ground yourself, I guess is the tag word that they use today. But it does help, because when you're standing there, you're being in your moment and you're thinking, and you've got fresh air on your face, and you're out of your stuffy room with your computer that's probably helping you talk negatively to yourself. And just reconnect. One of the things I really love, and in a Te Ao Māori view, it's called a pure, and it's like a cleansing. And what you do is you go to a moving body of water, so whether it's the ocean or a river, not the pools, a natural moving body of water. If it's the ocean, you go on an outgoing tide and you go for a swim, and all of that shit you put in the water. And you let the tide take it out. And if you're lucky enough, you stay there until the tide turns and you get all that good energy back onto you again. But when those little nagging voices come, or they do make you feel shame, or they make you feel like, you're not good enough, sometimes you just need to step out of your space, get rid of some of that negative energy, and then reevaluate. And then you realise that you are actually pretty bloody awesome. Or just drink pina coladas, that always works.
Yes to everything you guys just said. I think like what I've learnt to do, because that's like a massive hurdle, is like these inner voices and sort of everything that you think is like it's all in the mind basically. But I've found like accepting those voices and kind of like realizing that they come from a place of vulnerability and protection, and kind of acknowledging them and accepting them, and almost like loving them, and then you can just like let them go and like, yeah, so you kind of like, yeah, it's just like an acknowledging, and then you can just let it go and let like the good like powers rise back up again. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think if you guys want to take a seat and we get a big round of applause.